If you're new to the channel, this is part of a modular series I'm doing. There'll be a link in the description. It all starts with the grid video. So go watch the grid video and you can come back to this one and kind of jump in on it if you wanted to. Now, if you've been following along and you've been following my channel, more importantly, I talked about how to set up trim sheets in another video that wasn't part of the series, but this is three textures right here. This is a seamless floor texture. We got a trim sheet and a seamless texture for walls. That's it. And so all of this was generated basically using the same blocking out shapes that we had done prior in the series. So this is it's pretty straightforward, right? It's not too bad. And let's go ahead and just jump into it. So let's take a look at the trims first. And I just want to explain these things a little bit. And so more or less, I just modeled them out in Blender real quick, and I actually just took them into Substance, baked them out there. Not a big deal. I did use cage files to bake them, but we're going to take a look at the lows. They're planes. The lows are planes. So that's what we're baking onto. And then modeled these out as the highs, right? Not a big deal. And you can see here, very, very simple. Very, very simple. Anybody can model this kind of stuff, right? Yep. Most of the work is done in the material. And so this one's a little bit more complicated, but not really that special either. Just a side note, if you are trying to bake something like that in Substance, you just need a cube. Kind of place it around it. Believe it or not, that'll actually bake that out fairly well for the cage anyways. And so another little side note here, since we're seeing, but this is all modeled off the grid. So a couple of them I think I messed up, which might have been this one, but it's all lined up with the grid here. So just keep that in mind. And the reason I wanted to point this out is because we'll take a look at it here in the other scene in a second, but go to Affinity Designer real quick. So if you take a plane, a default plane, and you cut it up into 10 centimeter sections, you get something like this, right? And this would be like a basic kind of guide for a trim sheet. And so what ends up happening is when you make it off the grid, take a look here at this number, okay? 490, oh, I don't have it selected, do I? Let's see. Okay, so 409.5 pixels there for the height. That's what's most important. That's important because at 0.5 pixel, your bitmaps might bleed kind of weird if you use something like that. So if you're trying to, for example, say like repeat this over and over with itself, like you're stacking them geometry next to each other that's UV mapped with these individual sections, that could cause a little bit of a problem. Not necessarily, but it could be a little bit hard to find that little area that you need to actually place your UV maps. So just keep that in mind. We're gonna go ahead and check out. Let's just start a new scene real quick. I'm gonna show you how to set up these materials easy way. So there's a edit preferences, right? Add-ons, node wrangler, enable it. That's all you got to do. And so if you got to set up some materials, what we're gonna do here is just rename them whatever you want. Just say you're creating a wall, a trim, and a floor. Off the default cube here, that's fine. We're just going to do most of it in the editor. So we're going to go to shading editor here. Okay. And so when you select a node, in this case it's floor, Control Shift and T, find your textures that you created. Go to finish textures here, and we can see floors at the top. And you can see just select all the way through to the last floor here, holding Shift, and I can select all these. Now, when I export from Substance, I have it kind of set up in a custom way so that I get the object name, in this case, floor tile A, right? And then also I'll export out an OpenGL version of the normal map and a DirectX version. So I can just deselect the DirectX version by holding Control and clicking it, and bam, just like that. This is now in here. You'll see this didn't update, but we can quickly do that for the other ones as well. So here's the trim, right? And it becomes pretty easy to do this. It's not a big deal. So we got the trim to the trim down here. Go ahead and do that. So we don't need the DirectX. If you had the DirectX one loaded, it would actually load up. Or selected, it would actually load up anyway. So we can do the same thing for the wall now. I know that's the bottom of the wall, so we'll go to the top, base color, there we go. Let's deselect DirectX, bam. Just like that, set up as well. And so I do a couple other things to this as well. So for the trim, for example, I actually have an emissive for this. And so normal here, or you could try to use the base color. It's got, basically all these are non-colors, and then these are sRGBs. So the base color or the emissive color, I can select here, for example, and just open it, plug it into emission, turn up the strength, and we'll see here if we select the cube in edit mode and go to trim, assign, try doing a cube projection real quick. There we go. A U cube projection. You'll see that the emission's here. Now a lot of times I'll turn on bloom and I'll tweak these values a little bit, turn the intensity down, the radius down, so it's a lot less aggressive. And I'll turn ambient occlusion on, turn it to like 3, and distance I'll bump up a little bit. But this texture here actually has ambient occlusion for it too. So I'm gonna open it up, or press Shift D, copy the base again, open up the ambient occlusion for this one, trim. Okay, and now I can actually press Shift A, create a mix RGB. Okay, I can just plug that in there, and so plug that in there, and then we'll plug it into the base color. Okay, and by default it doesn't work all that great. You actually need to set it to usually multiply, but you can try different ones and see what kind of effects you get out of it. So multiply usually works pretty well, but not always. And so in this case, it does work. Now, side note, I mentioned in the scroll video, you can scroll through things. This is one of the best places to do it. So if you hit Control and mouse wheel, you can actually scroll through these like it's nothing. That's pretty cool. All right. So for the most part, our base material is now set up. Not a big deal. Now, something else I do is I actually make these able to use vertex colors. So you'll see here, vertex color. You can drag it down like this. And we could do another color, mix RGB, place it right here. And we can have the vertex colors mix with the vertex colors mix with the standard map here. And so you're going to have to find something that works here for you. Subtract, overlay, mix, blend, multiply. It just depends on what you're going for. Sometimes you want it real prevalent, sometimes you don't. So you can just bump the values around and see what you get. This particular piece, I believe right now, is Vertex. You got to go into Vertex Paint. So tab into Vertex Paint. Yeah. So for whatever reason, everything turns black off the bat, and then when you go into Vertex Paint, it automatically slides white. So it's kind of a weird thing. So if you ever run into that issue, I'm going to show you what to do about that here real quick. Because a lot of times you'll create other kind of objects, or you might have like, in this case, if I duplicate this won't work. But let's say you had a bunch of cubes you made, and they all had the trim on it, for example. You can see they're all black. Really annoying. But you can go into Vertex Paint, right? You see that one already turned white. Just hit Alt-Q. Make sure this is set to white. Usually that'll work. But you can see now I can also, let's say I wanted this to be red. I can fill this by hitting Shift-K. A little hard to remember that one, but you can see I can change the colors of these rather quickly. So that's not a big deal. And because of the way I did it, it doesn't influence darker areas quite as much. And so having really muted textures, or just like pretty much black and white ones almost, can be quite beneficial. So you can just get like off-color whites or whatever the case may be. Like however you want to use this is entirely up to you. All right, so I'm going to create a plane real quick. This is a default plane, not a big deal. We're all used to this one by now. And you can see here, got a couple of them. Actually, let's go ahead and assign this wall material. Okay, make sure that's good. Okay, and we're going to assign the trim. You see the trim came in automatically like that. So I usually work off these planes. So I do want to go into Vertex Paint and have it set up like so. So I can just duplicate this out, Shift D, hit X, hold Control, snap it to the grid. Actually, it's snapping incrementally right now, not to the grid, but if I use trim now, it's not a big deal. Okay, and there's a reason I do it like this. So we also have the floor tile, and I'll do the same thing with the floor tile. I'll add a vertex color to that, and oftentimes a vertex color to that as well. Now, depending on what you're working on, this isn't the only method of using materials or textures. You can also do what's called masking, right? Where you have different full-on materials that are seamless and custom masks to display those textures or those materials onto the object. So with that in mind, this here, you'll notice that if I turn on absolute grid snap, if I move a edge, so you can see I'm moving the edge, this is going to shift the UV map. If we come up here to options, there's correct face attributes. I set up a shortcut for this, or hotkey, for my mouse. So I can always turn this on and off when needed, as needed, as fast as possible. It doesn't matter. But there's also an option in here, keep connected. So just keep in mind, on kind of more complicated geometry, when you start shifting the geometry around and it's trying to correct the face attributes, it separates the UV maps apart from each other. Okay? Keep connected helps keep them together, but sometimes it adds distortions. Generally speaking, when you're working with really basic geometry, it doesn't matter as much. But so you can turn this on and off. If I say turn it on and off, it's because I'm just turning it on with my mouse. So right now you can see it's off. My mouse, there, it's on. So it's very quick, very easy to get into. But I can hold Control and Shift. I can snap to the grid. Very simple like that, right? So I can. This is why I like setting these up on the grid, because I can easily just break them back out and I don't have to worry about them too much, but may not be the best solution, just so you know. So you can see how I can just start adding these loop cuts in pretty much wherever I want, and it tends to work out pretty well. So right here, I want this one to go down. There we go. You want a loop cut there. All right. And so this is going to be one. I'm going to press Y, 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 Y. Select them by face, Y, and then this last one's going to be, they're both together, so Y on both of those. All right, and so all of these as well, you could, of course, place the pivot points for them individually if you want, but we got to separate first. So select them all, press P, separate by loose parts. They're all individual elements now. So I can go into edit mode, and I'm using machine tools, of course, so Shift S. I'm going to put the object origin to vertex here, right? And so I want to change all of them though, right? So I got to go through all of them one by one. So Shift Alt Q there, go through them. And now, oop, I hit the wrong key. Start placing these origin points out like so. This one needs to go down here. Okay. Check them as I go up so I don't get too carried away here. This isn't extremely essential. It's not necessarily required either. Just helps to have your pivot point on a grid somewhere, but it could be in the center. And a lot of times it's easier to work with it in the center, in my opinion. But that's going to be completely optional where you place your origin points, right? So you'll find what works and what doesn't work for you. You can adjust accordingly. Okay. All right. So all of that's laid out now. So let's say this is like our base components here. Normally I'll take the walls and I will just go ahead and rotate them up 90 degrees. I'll apply rotation and scale, place pivot points where you need them. Okay. And just kind of get them all prepped up. Same process as we've already done pretty much. You can see this one might want a pivot point down here. So I can snap like so. These ones might want to use the active element. So we can go ahead and snap them like so. All right, so it's all lined up. And now just, yeah, apply rotations and scales and everything. So wanted to go through and double check everything, just make sure they're good. Sometimes you might end up on one grid but not on the others, so just check that as well. And in this case, we're okay, fine. Notice I have not offset these, okay? So in this one, what we're going to be doing is not offsetting it. Just going to be playing around with them, and we're not going to worry about pivot points so much and how far each individual section of a wall sticks out and stuff right off the bat. You can always kind of just start this up first, and then kind of mess around with those later. So duplicating, of course, can be extremely important, or doing instances even more so, right? But let's say I want this little strip here. All right, so I'm going to duplicate it over, pull it out, just whatever, a little bit. I'll pull this section out as well. And so we can start to use these to build things. Now, this is personally how I like to work, but you can certainly model things and then UV map them onto these textures. You don't have to do it this way. So like this little light section, maybe I like it like this, and maybe I want to push this back in further like that. I have this little weird thing like this going on, right? You see how I can just start laying things out next to each other. It gets a little bit better because let's say this section here, I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees. See, the pivot point is way off for some reason. I want to put this one in the center down here, okay? And I already know this particular piece should have a hard time laying out with itself. Maybe it won't. It did last time I used it. Okay, so guess not this time. All right, cool. So we made a more or less like a little pillar, basically. We can press Control J, join it all together. Place the origin point here to this section. Apply rotation scale. There we go. We got a little metal pillar thing going on. And we can just stick it in there. So you can see how you can start to build up wall units. Now remember, your wall units, actually in one of the other videos I kind of messed up on this. You usually don't want the pillars to be a part of the wall unit if they're sitting outside of that grid area, right? So just keep that in mind. Don't combine them together like that. If you do want to try to combine a pillar into a wall unit, you usually want to do number like this maybe, and get rid of that one perhaps. And then every time you duplicate it out, we're going to use active element here. Should be able to let's use, well, let's move it out first, and we'll make that the active element. There we go. Yeah, so something like that would be more, would probably be a little bit better, I would say. And this right here is also clipping pretty heavily, right? So, just play around with your shapes and your designs and see what you can get going. It's really not that hard, and it's a lot of fun, you know? And this is where you can really explore how you're going to lay things out and how you want them to look, because you have a ton of opportunity here to just create whatever your mind imagines, This situation, I probably would, I feel like I should push these in a little tiny bit. I think that would be more useful, so some of that pillar sticks out a little bit more. Something like that, maybe. That's kind of cool. And there's nothing down here. So just check this out. This is just something I want to mention real quick. Is that when you have correct face attributes on, and you sometimes like rotate something, you'll see that it messes up the UV maps. Okay, so turn it off sometimes to do things like rotate, but you can turn it on. You can extrude Z here. You'll see we get this going on, right? Which is kind of cool. And we can certainly create the amount of stuff we need here. We can also grab something like this. We could do something as simple as like a cube projection. Okay. And in this case, I think it rotated it, to be honest, but we'll see. Okay, not cube projection. Which one is it? All right, there's a way to shift the UV maps up and down. I just forgot it. So we'll go to the UV editor and go over here. We'll turn this into material preview. There we go. And let's just grab this and move it. There's something else we might want to use. In this case, I'm just going to use this little thing down here. Now I'm going to press S and Y to scale and do this number, right? And so what that does is that squishes that texture. And this is usually frowned upon, okay? Changing the aspect ratio of your island or your UV map. You don't want to do, generally you don't want to do that, but sometimes you can get away with it. In this case, I think it would be okay because A, it's going to be cramped up under here, but B, it looks like there needs to be a vent under there too. So we're going to use that active element. We're going to use this edge to rotate, go 90 degrees. Okay, but check this out. It's broken. because we didn't turn off correct face attributes. So we have to turn off correct face attributes and then do it again. A little bit of a hassle, but I tell you what, now that we've done that, you'll see here, we now have a nice little vent underneath all that, right? And so this is all pretty much set up. And so you can consider this maybe one modular piece. You might want a little top section for this one, unfortunately. It's not a good idea to leave this one probably open. So we'll do that. We can do that. We'll push this down. Here's another thing you could do. So I got correct face attributes on. I'm just lining up to this area, but maybe I want to stop it like right there. Okay, now watch what happens here. When we do the rotation, we got to turn correct face attributes off. We rotate it. Hold Control 90 degrees. There we go. Just looks like it lined up, so it's not really gonna. I'm not gonna be able to show you what happens here. Okay, let's try this again. We're gonna make it a little bit bigger. We're gonna give it a top vent too. Okay, and so we can take this whole face, turn correct face attributes off, rotate it 90 degrees. All right, sometimes you'll run into this where you like overrun something. Now you can, of course, you'll see we can squish it, but we could fix it with face attributes, right? We can turn that off and we can squish it and line it up to the grid. All right, and that's a little trick because it's kind of cool because you can actually see what you want to be part of the texture and then kind of force it into a little modular section. But it's not necessarily, it's one of those things. It's not necessarily a good thing either, right? So those kind of things can happen. Let's play with a bevel real quick. Let's see what happens if I bevel this. Sometimes they work pretty good, sometimes they don't, but you'll see what here. Using even numbers, it usually works pretty well. And so we can do things like that. Okay, don't forget to shade things smooth. And sometimes you might find little sections that you also want to add more detail to. So these are just kind of blocky shapes that we're using right now, but you certainly can go pretty crazy with the amount of details you want out of your objects. I'm going to do an inset, and when I inset, I'm going to hold Control, push out a little bit. I'm going to hit B, get rid of that side face for now. And you'll see that I can actually do this, and it works pretty well. So we have this nice little section up here. Problem is, though, oh, maybe it doesn't. I thought for sure it was going to, it should be, yeah, poking a little bit above that. Okay, yeah, just because it's wire, it's transparent. Well, it's like, yeah, you can see it's poking through. Okay, so sometimes you got to take things and just force them to work basically with whatever you're doing. So let's just go ahead and just bump it down. This won't even be on the grid technically. My main grid point for this one, the object that I'm most concerned about, so I'm going to join it all together, is going to be this bottom corner. Okay, and we can always check it on the grid as well. So we'll go to solid view for a second. Pull it up for a sec. Okay, so it won't line up on the top there, but it will line up on the bottom section. So we can still snap that to a grid if we need to. And it'll behave something like this. And then if it's a meter grid snap, probably do that number on the bottom. Anyways, probably not a good idea to use that for a meter anyways. It's probably better to do, press Z to get to material preview. By the way, you don't have to always go over here. Anyway, so that should work out, but it's going to snap to the 10 centimeter grid, basically, what I'm getting at. All right. So go through this process over and over and over again, creating all kinds of different little elements. You could do lights, you could do whatever you want, you know, lights and walls and little decorative kind of trims and whatever else. You can see it's too small right now. I forgot to scale it up. Whoops. And so we can scale it up usually relatively easy if we grab something like this one, use the active element. And in this case, it's I want 3 meter tall walls. These are 2 meters, so I need to do S 1.5, right? And the floor tiles, we don't actually do the floor tiles because they're right. So S 1.5 here. All right. And with any luck, if this went correctly, all of this will still be on the grid when you do that, but you have to apply rotations and scales again. Okay. And so as you model these pieces, you can start to lay them out into more complicated things like rooms or buildings or whatever the case may be. Just remember, you can do instances. You can use the prefab setup that I showed in a prior video. Just play around with it and get used to working with it. You're going to find oftentimes that you probably didn't do the trims exactly the way you wanted. You might want to change things around. So I highly recommend, making your own trim sheets, making your own materials. It's extremely important because it allows you to adjust them and kind of tweak things and whatever. But you can certainly, buy ones or download ones that are free or whatever the case may be. Nothing wrong with that either. It's nice to have an asset library of just stuff to play with, And so that at least will hopefully free up your mind, and maybe you'll think about going back and creating your own material on top of that one later on or something, right? So you have a unique look or something. And you can make a trim sheet modular, so just keep that in mind. This one here is somewhat kind of modular in a sense. You determine like what you need for a multitude of different walls, and you can just always use that same layout to create your different trims. So this could be, a corporate business look thing or whatever's going on here. But if you were to make it all brick, for example, it could be like an exterior wall trim. And you can use the same wall units to do different things. You just swap the materials on them, right? And so that's kind of a fun thing to do, all right? Also, if you're going to start doing texture masking, that's extremely important to do that as well, because you're going to probably want things to blend just right with each other. So anyways, with all that in mind, you can go ahead and save this somewhere and keep working on it. Save it in iterations, so if you mess up, you can always roll back. And we'll take a look at this scene one more time. We'll kind of break it down because we kind of just took a quick glance at it, and I didn't talk about anything else going on. This is an Eevee, okay? And because we're in Eevee, it has this thing here, which is a light probe iridescence volume, which is extremely, extremely important if you're going to try to bake your lighting. So you have to configure it. It's a little bit modified. I have it a little bit denser, but bake indirect lighting here under the renderer settings for Eevee. You're going to need that. You also need a cube map. So let's go over the iridescence volume though real quick. So you can see I just bumped up the resolution a little bit. It's still kind of like in a preview mode almost. Like this isn't really that great, but I don't think baking in Eevee is all that great to begin with. But let's go ahead and move on to this. So same spot here, light probe, reflection cube map, or in this case it's a cube sphere thing. Okay, so you get the idea. And you can adjust the values here if you want to get a better looking reflection map. But once you do that, you go to the renderer, you click bake indirect lighting, and it's going to do this little number super fast. Like it doesn't even really struggle, you know. There we go. That's back. All right, so Shift tilde key and G, you can kind of walk around if you're not familiar with that. We could certainly do that, so I can get around in this scene. Shift tilde key, you can fly around as well while you're working. It helps out quite a bit. All right, let's take a look at this in solid view. This example here, I have not pre-offset all of the walls, I don't think. I might have. Yeah, I might have done it. I wasn't sure if I did or didn't. I did. I did not. Some of them probably are, some of them aren't. And so this isn't a full set dress, right? Like I'm not too worried about it right now because I would definitely, if I had run into some issues where like I didn't offset something, then I would go ahead and do that later on. Now you don't have to offset them either. You can just lay them out like that and then just make corner units for different sizes and stuff like that. Even if you offset it, you're going to have to make corner units for different sizes. And it's kind of a weird runaway train. It's just like a back and forth thing. Personally, I like to build up off of a single wall size. And so there's other ways of working. You can make like huge modular chunks of walls, right? And then have doors and everything in them as well. But they don't have to be little panels that are more granular like this, right? So certainly have fun with that. Now, so a lot of this stuff was kind of the same process here. Like literally it's just the same model rotated or whatever the case may be. So let's take a look at this one. This one's not even correct actually. Almost are backwards. Yes, I'm gonna recalculate those outside. I knew I updated this one, but I guess I didn't put it all the way up. Okay, so there's that. Now let's isolate it. Basically, take one section here. That's the same thing we just made, right? and it's just rotated around and it intersects with itself, and then it creates a little pillar like that I can use on this wall section if I need to, or I could use it in the middle of the room, right? Pretty simple stuff. This here is just a plane more or less that's got a little bevel to it, and then it's mirrored across. There's actually a mirror line here. That's not ideal, but you get the idea. Like if you're not looking for it, you probably would never see it. And so all trims up here. I do want to mention one thing about curved surfaces real quick. So like say we had a cube. Almost forgot to mention this, and this is pretty important. Say we had a cube. You'll see this happen in a lot of video games where they have some kind of shape like this, right? And it's curved, right? And it looks really cool. It looks really fancy, which is great. You know, that's the way it should look. But let me show you how to unwrap something like this. This is pretty important. Like an arch might do this, you know, things like that. So say we wanted this to be part of this wall somehow, like right here in the middle, like that. Okay. And we can see it's on the floor. There we go. So we don't need the back face. We don't need the bottom face. We're going to keep it simple. Okay. I can select it over here. The little dot wasn't in the middle. It's way over there. All right. So we got this going on. That's not correct right there. Oh, what happened there? Okay. Let's isolate it. / isolates. KCA / okay, so / isolate KCA cut, and then yeah, there we go. Now we can grab this section in the back here, press E, and extrude it out like this. Just a moment. So we go back to the grid point there, place it back here as well. Okay. Apply rotation scale, apply shading smooth. There we go. So you might have something like this, right? It might stick out a little bit too. In this case, I don't like the way it expands out. So you would have to use probably the 3D cursor. You can just shift, right click and hold, and then hit control and snap to grid. You could probably just press E, and we're gonna go back. We're gonna do a orientation 3D cursor. So this should expand out like that. There. So you can see how it comes out kind of evenly with the bottom and the top here. That's the only thing that's good for. And in this case, I guess we did that. So so S and then Shift X. I'm gonna hold control while doing that. So there we go. All right. So let's just double step it here real quick. Do that little double step. I'll unwrap this after that. So the biggest thing is that a lot of times on faces like this, you actually want an additional kind of trim that comes through here. And so if you inset and hold B, and you can do this number. Apparently we got a face down here or something. Let's do AM merge by distance real quick. It should not be insetting down there. It is. Sure why though. There's a face down there. Look, it's a double edge. Those ones will actually get you pretty quickly. There's like this little tiny edge you can't see. So when you see something behaving unpredictably, is something usually wrong. There's either like a hidden edge or there's something going on, right? There's like some kind of vertex just chilling out somewhere, or double vertices or double edges. Just really weird stuff sometimes happens in Blender. All right, so that should have fixed that. Let's do this again. Okay, so when we inset, we hit B. There we go. We can pull out pretty far usually. We could pull out a little section like this, right? You can't always go infinitely long, but you can go pretty far anyways. So let's do that. And I don't like these being cut so quick like that. I'm gonna pull them up just a little bit. It would help to line this up to a grid too. So we'll do that. And then these ones we'll just go ahead and just eyeball them, but we'll move them out like right there. Okay. And so not a big deal. All right, now let's go ahead and apply the trim sheet to it. There you go. And already comes in. It kind of looks badass the way it came in. That's not, I'm not gonna lie. So at least this side kind of does. And so what we're gonna do is just pull it out here and hide that one. I don't want to. I don't want to accidentally mess it up. That's all. Modeled all that. I don't know if I'm using these. I don't know if I'm gonna redo the materials and make them better or not. So this section here, we want to unwrap this. So we can press U, unwrap, right? Go in the UV editor, rotate it 90 degrees, and then we got to line it up. We can hold control and shift and try to get it just right here in the center. UV Toolkit for doing environment art using trims and stuff like that is essential, or some other add-on like this at least, because I can easily just do like match. I can fit to bounds basically. So, and then I can match islands together and stuff. So this is really cool because let's say I want this and this right here all to be the same, right? So I can go ahead and just unwrap them. I'm gonna press U, unwrap. We got all that. I'm just gonna stack these islands first, and then I'm gonna match our fit to bounds. You'll see they're all lined up to the edges of the UV map. I can rotate 90 degrees. You notice when I rotate it, it went local. All right, it has a group mode as well, so we can rotate 90 degrees. And now we can actually just pick and choose what we want this to be here. And it's not that bad of a deal because now we can just kind of see what's going on. And I don't know why it happens to be so dark, but it is. Maybe it needs to be sharpened or something. I don't know. We'll do sharpen. Oh, I forgot we were isolated. That might be why it's dark. The lights are playing off of it still. Oh no, the lights aren't doing it. Oh, you know what? Vertex Paint, maybe. Ah, look at that. It's kind of cool too. All right, so Vertex Paint is the Vertex Colors coming in as black. It just drives me nuts personally. They should come in just pure white because everybody, wants them to look right when they get started. I think, hopefully. And so, see how we can kind of like run around in here and play with this. I don't want to do any extreme scaling, but we could try this if we wanted. But let's do an addition. We're gonna add the wall tile. And we're gonna assign it to these ones. Okay. And so we're gonna switch over to the wall tile now. It's kind of a pain finding these things. There's a little trick about this, and that's in the shader. If you actually select the node, it works. But anyways, so we could just do that here as well. So wall a base color. I usually use the base colors. In this case, it might not be. Let's use the wall a height. No, we'll use the normal for this one. Okay, I want like a little line on each side of it. You can see this almost lines up perfectly too. That's nice. So you can get pretty picky about these kind of things because you can see now we have this little tiny kind of bevel right here on the edge of this thing. And you see where lining up to the pixel might be better than trying to line up to the grid. Could snap to those pixels, but yeah, so that looks good there. What about here? We're going to use the trim, I think, on this section. This whole section here. We're going to do that on the other side as well, so we'll do them at the same time. Okay, so we can do U, unwrap. These come in bent. If you model everything in quads, the whole model doesn't have to be in quads, just the strip that you want. Okay, it has to be in quads though. You can do typical unwrapping trick. You select edges and you do align auto, align auto, align auto, and align auto. So that's the manual way of doing it. Now you can select the face and you can do follow active quads. I think Blender added an unwrap for this where it's just follow active quads right off the back. You know what? Let me try that real quick. I haven't tried that out. I don't even know if that's part of that. So let's just press U and unwrap so they're all messed up again. I'll do U, follow active quads. Length average, okay. Okay, it does something a little bit different, so whatever. And if you're using UV Toolkit on the other hand, you just select the islands and you do straighten UVs. And there's a free add-on that does this as well. I just forgot the name of it. You can stack the islands, fit it to the bounds, all that fun stuff. You go back to the trim sheet, base color. You can assign trim to this. Make sure it should still be assigned. Maybe this is lights on the edge here. All right, something like that. And this section is a little bit thick, so we end up with some kind of weirdness right here, right? But it could be doable. Let's see what we can do with it. Could squish it a little, maybe. I don't know if that's the best solution there. You could, let's not squish it like that. Let's just make it smaller. Gonna kill the textile density a little bit. Makes the lights bigger. But you could do other things, like you could stretch it in the other direction, right? You can do some things like that. You can see, though, it's not completely predictable. Some of these aren't so predictable. So, play around with it, see what works for you, what meets your quality expectation level and all that. But in this case, I think I'm going to go with this one down here. So I'm not going to have a chance to use a dark color again, I think, except for maybe here. But I really want lights right there, to be honest. So these ones get unwrapped and then straightened. And now we can go ahead and stack the islands, fit them to the bounds. And we'll go ahead and flip them 90 degrees. Go put the lights on them. In this case, I think the lights are pretty good. But I got to scale down a little bit. Fit all that in there. And last but not least, I want to skew it just a little bit. All right, so one of the biggest downsides of Blender is that the UV system doesn't handle straightening out islands very well like that. So you will get a little bit of like weird triangulation no matter what you do, unless you add more polygons. That's not always an option. So sometimes you can't do that. You can also use textures in weird ways like this right here as well, which is kind of fun. So you don't necessarily have to always make sense of what you're doing. Sometimes, like you just want to do unwrap here. You'll see that these come in. Grab this one, rotate it. Oop, rotate it the wrong way. There we go. Now go ahead and right click mirror X, select them both, stack islands. It'll be the same on each side now. We could play around with things like that, right? Like the way it was. Something we could do. I think this one would be better as a wall though, personally. And so I can actually scale this up or down. So again, it's going to mess with that textile density, but gives me an opportunity to kind of see what's going on here. Sometimes it can be a little bit hard to see because of my theme here, but it's usually on these really, really, really light materials that happens. But see here, that worked out quite well. We didn't do this one here, I think. We didn't do this one either. So we're just going to do U unwrap, create islands, stack them, rotate them, fit them to the bounds. This one we're going to do, I think, silver. I'm going to move it only on Y, so I'm pressing G and Y. That's what. See how that looks. It's kind of interesting. Yeah, so we could run with that, and so we can unisolate it. Go into layout, material preview now, or render preview. That object back right there. Let's see what happens. We'll slide it on over. Got my little Android that I haven't finished yet, but I'm gonna save that because I'm pretty sure I'm probably gonna make some weird stuff like this at some point. And you can see the idea here come to life basically. Like this is pretty good. The textile density is okay. It's not the sharpest it could be probably. If I had a 4096, it'd probably be better. I'm using 2048s, but you get the idea. We have in total for this whole scene. This is he has his own material, but um, trim, wall, floor. And so Vertex Colors can also do things like this, just so you know. The floor is using Vertex Color to do that. That's the same pattern, same texture, same material, all right? And so as a result, we end up with some pretty cool stuff. Now, side note, you'll notice that my scene isn't jumping around all over the place. A lot of you guys probably have, when you do Shift Tilde and G and walk around and stuff, a lot of times it flickers for just a moment. You can turn that off by setting your viewport to 1. It looks jankier, but it's not going to do that anymore. And also, because we did update this, we can delete lighting cache and then just rebake our lighting here real quick and see what we end up with. All right, so that's pretty much it for this video. I'll probably be doing some more modular stuff, but they're probably going to be on like vehicles and maybe we'll get to character type stuff, but um, probably vehicles, more than likely just more environmental stuff, just static mesh, props, that kind of stuff. But we'll certainly get into all of it at some point, I'm sure. I don't know when that'll be though, so don't hold me to all that. I might just give up. Who knows? Anyways, that's it for this one. I hope you enjoyed the video. You learned a lot. You could probably see at this point how this all comes together, right? This is still very rough blocking type shapes, but it's starting to get somewhere, right? And so once you understand how to model on the grid, how to UV map it a little bit, start laying it out. Now your imagination is really becoming the limit because you can add more polygons, you can do nicer bevels, you see where it's going, right? So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll check you out in the next one, all right? So take care.